A level designer's ability to make a theme is what separates a good designer from a bad designer. However, many people struggle with theming because it's an abstract concept and there's a lot to it. Today, I'll help you make sense of this so that you can potentially use some of this knowledge when designing levels or games for yourself. Today, in order, I'll be discussing what is a theme, why do we want to have a theme, the different types of theming, how we build those themes, how to develop an idea, and how you layer different types of themes together. I'll be mostly focusing on Mario, but most of what I'm going to talk about today will apply to basically any sort of game design. First, what even is a theme? A theme is a basically recurring pattern in a level that the player can get used to and associate with that level. Why do we even want a theme? There are two main reasons. One is for uniqueness. If you tend to focus on something, you're more likely to make something that is completely different from everyone else's because it's really unlikely that someone else has made a level and used all the themes that you specifically chose for your level. While some people think, oh, well, you know, doing the exact same thing over and over again, that's no variety. That is basically the opposite of what is true. The more you focus on something, the more it is likely that someone has not seen that specific thing before. Because if you make a bunch of setups, for example, all about snow pokies, and all those setups are different from each other, then it's really unlikely that the player has seen all of those setups with snow pokies before. The second main reason you want to theme a level is to make it much more memorable. For example, it's a lot easier to remember that level where you smack around a bunch of big bosses while the Powerpuff Girls theme plays in the background. That's a lot more memorable than a generic Mario level with, like, there were some Koopas and some Spinies and maybe there's a Hammer Bro somewhere in there. Like, it makes the whole thing a lot more valuable. And the third of the two main reasons why you want to theme a level is to make it more consistent. So you can focus on something very specific and make it, in theory, a lot easier for the player to understand what you're trying to do. Let's talk about the different types of theming. First is the best known, which is a core idea. This is when you build your level around one specific mechanic or one idea that the whole level is about. For example, this level is based on hidden blocks on tracks that make light in dark levels. So if I make the level dark, then you can actually see the hidden blocks and hit them more easily. The second main type of theming is course part based theming, which is more or less when you see the exact same gameplay elements repeat over and over multiple times in a level. Next, we have aesthetic theming. This is kind of similar to course parts, but instead of picking a consistent set of enemies and obstacles for your level, it's more like the aesthetic of the level as a whole, like how it looks like, is pretty consistent. Lastly, we have mechanical theming. Mechanical theming is when you ask the player to do a similar set of maneuvers throughout a level. This level, for example, focuses primarily on wall jumping, throwing enemies, and basic platforming. The main reason to use mechanical theming is to keep a consistent small set of different things you're asking from the player that they will grow more accustomed to, and these are the only things you're really asking of the player. Like, if you have a level where you have like shell jumps and wall jumps and twirl jumps, you kind of need the player to know how to do all of them in order to beat the level. So how do we make a theme? The main way to make a theme is to use a similar pattern over and over. It should be different enough to explore the different ideas you have going on in your level, but similar enough so that when someone plays your level, they can kind of like get the idea that it's all about something specific. First, you want to repeat course parts as much as possible. If you're going to use a Koopa in your level, don't just use one or two. Use them as much as you can. This doesn't mean to just keep doing the same setup over and over, right? You want to mix it up enough that it feels like you're exploring the idea without it being repetitive. Here, for example, you see all sorts of setups that use Koopas that are completely different from each other. Doing this builds up the Koopa as one of the core course parts of the theme of this level. We can do a similar thing with aesthetics. Here, the main terrain of my level are primarily ground tiles, clear pipes, brick blocks, and cloud blocks. These are the bread and butter of how everything works in the level, and I might use a couple of extra blocks here or there, like some hard blocks, in order to give a little bit more variety when I need to, but I will try to focus on that core set of course parts as much as I can. This kind of goes along with the previous point, which is to also just use a smaller variety of course parts. The smaller the variety of different kinds of gameplay elements you bring into a level, the more the ones that you did use are going to naturally repeat. Next, I'll specifically discuss how you build up a gameplay idea. A gameplay idea is what you build your level around. It might be the core gimmick or just why you made the level in the first place. Let's say you're trying to make a level all about a specific idea. How do you do that? When you want to develop an idea, there are basically two steps. You introduce the idea and then you develop the idea. Here, for example, I have this mechanic where the dot line blocks will turn solid on a metronome. And every time that metronome goes off, Mario will basically lose all of his momentum in midair. When constructing this tutorial, there are a couple of things we really need to understand. First is the isolation principle. The isolation principle is when you want to teach someone something very specific, so you isolate it so that there's literally nothing else in the room. All right, I don't have some Koopas here, I don't have springs here, I don't have claws here, I don't have any other distraction. There's literally just Mario and the idea in the most basic, simplified form that I can possibly make that will teach Mario how this works as quickly as possible. When making a tutorial, keep in mind the player might not yet know what's going on, so you don't want them to die. Like here, for example, I could have easily made this a death pit. Then I would be potentially punishing the player for something that they felt like they didn't understand yet. In my experience, that is the absolute fastest way to get someone to hate your level. Now that we've introduced the idea, we want to develop it further. We want to use the idea again, but this time a little bit differently. Like here, for example, we get a ton of momentum from that spring that we lose whenever the dot line blocks go off. We can further explore this in other setups that also use that mechanic. You want to spend as little time in your tutorial so that you can develop your idea. The end goal is to get to setups that you can literally only do and make sense in a level because of the context of the setups that came before it. Because you have the tutorial and because you have everything that came before it, now the player is ready to understand the next setup that you have, which can be wackier and crazier and more involved than the previous one, to the point where if anyone else just tried to do that in their own level, it would fail because the player doesn't have that context outside of your level. Lastly, we'll talk about layering theming, which is where everything comes together. All right, all the different types of theming that I discussed today are not mutually exclusive. You should be using all of them at the same time as much as possible. Sometimes you won't be able to get all sorts of theming all working the way I described in this video, and that's okay, but you should try your best to make as many of them work all at the same time, because the more consistent patterns you see in a level, the more polished it will be, the more memorable it will be, and the more unique it will be. I'll close out with some examples. Here in this frog suit level, we have the main idea, which is low gravity bouncing with the frog suit. Furthermore, we have course part theming, where Buzzy Beetles are the #1 most important core course part of this level. They're the one that repeat the most and the most important part of the level. We also have some other sub-themes going on. A lot of reusing of munchers, piranha plants, spike tops, and moles. Additionally, we have aesthetic themes, where the main course parts I'm using aesthetically are going to be those piranha plants / munchers, ground tiles, and those semi-solids. I could be using bridges and mushroom platforms and all that, but I'm choosing not to. I'm choosing to stay focused on a core set of course parts that is going to repeat as much as possible. And lastly, this level has a mechanical theme where the main thing you're doing is basic platforming and bounces with full hops. This level has a main idea of the free fall mechanic. It has a mechanical theme where the main things that you do are just ground pound and twirl to change your position in midair. We have the aesthetic / course part theme of the bill blasters, munchers, and spikes. And of course we have the core idea of the free-falling maze. This level has the main idea where collecting a coin will allow the entire screen to advance forward. Furthermore, I have mechanical theming with regular jumps, spin jumps, and jumps off of claws. This level's main aesthetic theme is the use of ground tiles, semi-solids, and mushroom platforms. And for course parts, the main themes are claws, thwomps, and of course, the coins. One last note is to focus on how your course parts are going to fit together when you're designing the theme of your level before you go too deep into making it. This is because a theme requires you to repeat the same idea multiple times, which also means you're not going to have full access to all the tools you have all the time. In this level, for example, we have a lot of coin collection. And so one thing that goes really well with coin collecting is claws, because claws can hold coins in them indefinitely, and we can let go of them, etc. Even though I'm restricting my options by choosing to focus on coins and claws, I'm intentionally picking a course part that will go well with the other idea. Furthermore, I'm also picking thwomps because you can spin jump off of a claw into a thwomp. So overall, the thwomp will go very well with the claw, which will go very well with the coins. That's enough preaching for today. I hope this helps you out in constructing your own levels and bringing everything together cohesively. If you like this content, like and subscribe and all that. Later.